Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is Michael. I am 42 years old, and if someone had told me years ago that I would end up in a courtroom fighting my own sister over our father's inheritance, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a way of tearing families apart when money enters the picture. Why father was not a rich man by the world's standards, but he was everything to me. He had worked all his life as a mechanic, running a small garage in town. I grew up with the smell of oil and grease, the sound of tools clanging, and his rough but steady hands teaching me how to tighten a bolt, how to replace a carburetor, how to keep an old car alive longer than anyone thought possible. When he passed away, it wasn't just his laugh or his wisdom that I missed. It was the sense of stability he carried, the quiet strength of a man who had spent every day working honestly. When his lawyer called to inform me and my younger sister, Amanda, about the reading of his will, I already knew what was written there. My father had been very clear with me. The inheritance, amounting to $200,000, would be split between us. Equal shares, $100,000 each. Fair and simple. But Amanda had always been different. Where I had followed in my father's footsteps, working, saving, living modestly, Amanda had taken another path. She loved extravagance. Designer clothes, expensive trips, a new car every few years. She never worked steadily, never saved, and always seemed to lean on my father when she needed help. He gave in too many times, I think out of guilt for a mother leaving when we were young. The day of the will reading, I arrived at the lawyer's office in a suit that still smelled faintly of mothballs. Amanda swept in 10 minutes late, heels clicking, sunglasses perched on her head, dressed like she was walking into a fashion show instead of a legal proceeding. She gave me a cold smile, then sat down across from me. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Harris, adjusted his glasses and began reading. His voice was calm, professional. I, Robert Thompson, leave behind an inheritance of $200,000 to be divided equally between my two children, Michael Thompson and Amanda Thompson, in equal shares of $100,000 each. It was exactly as my father had told me. My throat tightened, emotions swelling as I thought of the man who had raised me. But before I could even let the words sink in, Amanda slammed her hand on the table. "This is wrong," she snapped. "Dad promised me everything. That money is mine." Mr. Harris blinked, startled. "Ms. Thompson, the will is clear. It states equal division." Amanda leaned forward, her eyes blazing at me. "Michael doesn't deserve a dime. He already had everything. Dad's attention, Dad's love, the business, the house. I was the one who took care of him in his final months, not Michael. That money belongs to me." Her words cut deep. Yes, she had been around more during Dad's last months, but not out of love. She had been circling like a hawk, waiting for the moment to strike. I had visited as often as I could, juggling my own job and family, while she lived off Dad's generosity. And now she wanted to erase me from his legacy entirely. That I clenched my fists under the table, my voice low but steady. "Amanda, you're lying. Dad wanted us to share it. He told me himself." Her laugh was sharp, cruel. "Of course he told you that. He always played favorites. But this time, I'm not letting you steal what's mine." Mr. Harris cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The will is legally binding. Unless you intend to challenge it in court, the inheritance will be divided as written." Amanda's eyes narrowed at me, and in that instant, I knew she was going to fight. She wasn't going to accept half. She wanted it all. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table staring at the papers, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I had never imagined I would be forced to take my own sister to court, but I also knew my father's wishes mattered. He had one of fairness, equality. He had trusted us to honor that. Amanda was about to drag his memory through the mud for money, and I couldn't let that happen. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was about respect for my father, for the life he built, for the legacy he left behind. And if Amanda wanted a war, then I was prepared to fight. The days after the will reading felt like walking through quicksand. Every step forward was met with a deeper pull of tension, dragging me down. Amanda wasted no time starting what I can only describe as a smear campaign against me that IT began with phone calls. Aunts, uncles, Even distant cousins started reaching out, their voices carrying the same rehearsed disbelief. Michael, how could you try to take everything from your sister? At first, I didn't understand. I hadn't spoken to most of them in weeks, some even months. Then it clicked. Amanda had gotten to them first. She spun her story like a master manipulator. She told them she had been Dad's caretaker in his final months, that I barely showed up, that I didn't care until the money was involved. She claimed Dad had promised her the entire $200,000 because she was the only one who deserved it. And she painted me as the greedy older brother swooping in at the last moment to rob her. The worst part was how convincing she sounded. Amanda had always had that ability. She could look you straight in the eye and tell the most outrageous lie, and somehow people believed her. I had grown up watching her talk her way out of trouble with teachers, neighbors, even the police once when she was caught shoplifting. She had a gift, but she used it like a weapon that I tried defending myself. I told our relatives the truth, that Dad had been clear about splitting the inheritance equally, that he had wanted fairness. But my words were drowned out by Amanda's emotional theatrics. She cried over the phone, telling them how betrayed she felt, how much she had sacrificed. I could almost see her crocodile tears soaking the receiver point one evening. I stopped by a local diner where Dad's old friends often gathered. As I walked in, conversations faltered. Eyes shifted toward me, some filled with pity, others with suspicion. One of Dad's closest buddies, a man named Carl, shook his head at me. "Mike," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "your sister says you're trying to cut her out of everything." "That true?" I sat down across from him, my chest burning. "No, God, it's not true." Dadville was clear, half for me, half for Amanda. She's the one who wants it all. She's trying to erase me from his legacy. Carl studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't know what to believe. You kids ought to be leaning on each other right now, not tearing each other apart." His words stung. It wasn't just about money anymore. Amanda was poisoning Dad's memory, turning people against me, making me look like the villain in a story where I had only tried to honor his wishes like a teen-night. I lay awake in the house Dad left behind, staring at the ceiling beams he had once sanded with his own hands. I thought about the conversations we'd had before he passed, his tired but steady voice telling me, "Mike, I just want things to be fair. You and Amanda may not always see eye to eye, but promise me you'll respect each other." I had promised him, and now here I was, forced into a battle I never wanted against the very person I had sworn to stand beside. The breaking point came when Amanda showed up at my house unannounced. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "Sign it over to me," she said flatly. "All of it. If you do, I'll drop this whole thing. Otherwise, I'll make sure you regret it." I laughed bitterly. "Regret it? Amanda, I already regret that we've come to this. You're not getting Dad's entire inheritance. Not a chance." Her lips curled into a sneer. "Fine, then I'll see you in court. And trust me, I'll make you look like the greedy bastard you are." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete like a judge's gavel sealing my fate. I stood there in the doorway, fists clenched, the cool evening air biting against my skin. I knew then there was no turning back. Amanda was going to drag me through the mud, and I had no choice but to fight her head on. And as much as it broke my heart, I realized something I had never wanted to admit. My sister wasn't my family anymore. She was my enemy. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, a mix of history and tension that clung to the air like humidity. I had walked through those heavy doors before for jury duty, but this time was different. This time, it was my life, my father's legacy, and my dignity on the line. Amanda was already there when I arrived, sitting at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s who exuded confidence. Amanda wore black, as if mourning, though her posture was anything but fragile. She looked like a queen waiting for her crown. When our eyes met, she smirked, a silent message. "You're about to lose that I took my place with my attorney, Mr. Reynolds, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a reputation for being calm under fire." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Remember, Michael," he said quietly, "facts win cases, not theatrics. Let her put on her show. We'll stick to the truth." The judge, A stern woman named Judge Wilkins entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. And just like that, the battle began that Amanda's lawyer wasted no time spinning a narrative that made me sick to my stomach. Your Honor, my client dedicated herself to caring for her father in his final months. She sacrificed her time, her finances, and her well-being. Meanwhile, her brother, Michael Thompson, was absent, contributing nothing. It was their father's true wish that Amanda inherit the full $200,000. But due to confusion and oversight, the will does not reflect this intention. We are here to right that wrong. I wanted to leap out of my seat, to shout that it was all lies, but Mr. Reynolds squeezed my arm, grounding me. When it was our turn, he stood and spoke with measured calm. Your Honor, the will is crystal clear. It states in no uncertain terms that the inheritance of $200,000 is to be divided equally, $100,000 to each child. The document is signed, witnessed, and notarized. My client, Michael Thompson, honored his father's wishes, and he has nothing to gain by rewriting history. This case is not about justice. It is about greed. Amanda glared at me, her jaw tight. The testimony began. Amanda took the stand first, and her performance was nothing short of theatrical. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she painted herself as the devoted daughter who had sacrificed everything. She claimed she had paid for groceries, medical supplies, even hospital bills, none of which she could produce receipts for. She was his angel, her lawyer said dramatically, placing a hand on Amanda's shoulder. And angels deserve to be rewarded. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, my hands clammy, my throat dry. I swore an oath to tell the truth, then faced the courtroom. I told them about the nights I spent at Dad's bedside, the weekends I worked double shifts so I could bring him meals and pay his bills when Amanda disappeared for days at a time. I reminded them that Dad had been explicit with me. He wanted fairness, equal division, no favoritism. Then came the cross-examination. Amanda's lawyers circled me like a shark, her questions sharp and loaded. Mr. Thompson, isn't it true that your sister was living with your father during his final weeks while you were not? Yes, I admitted, but that doesn't erase the years of support I gave him. And she wasn't there out of pure devotion. She was waiting for this moment. The lawyer arched an eyebrow. So you're accusing your sister of exploiting your father's death for financial gain? I looked her square in the eyes. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Gasps rippled through the small audience in the courtroom. Amanda shot me a look of pure venom, her mask slipping for a brief second. As the hours turned into days, witnesses were called. Some of Dad's friends testified that they had seen me frequently at the house, fixing things, bringing groceries. A neighbor confirmed that Amanda often left for weekends while supposedly caring for Dad. Piece by piece, her story began to crack. But Amanda wasn't going down without a fight. She grew more hostile on the stand, snapping at questions, contradicting herself. At one point, she shouted, "That money is mine. Dad promised me." Her lawyer tried to hush her, but the damage was done. Judge Wilkins frowned deeply, scribbling notes. I could sense the tide turning, but I didn't allow myself to hope too much. Courts are unpredictable, and Amanda was relentless. When the gavel finally struck at the end of that week, the judge announced that she would review the evidence and deliver her ruling in a few days. The room emptied, but Amanda lingered just long enough to whisper as she passed me, "Enjoy your little victory dance. It won't last." I sat there in the empty courtroom, exhausted, drained, but with a flicker of determination still burning. I had stood my ground. I had told the truth. And now it was out of my hands. For the first time, I felt the weight of what I was fighting for. It wasn't just about $100,000. It was about defending my father's memory, about refusing to let Amanda rewrite the story of who he was and what he wanted. And as much as it hurt, I knew this war was far from over. The days leading up to the verdict felt longer than any I had lived before. Every hour dragged like a weight tied to my chest. I tried to keep myself busy, fixing things around the house, catching up on work, but my mind never strayed far from that courtroom. No matter what I did, I kept replaying the trial in my head. Amanda's crocodile tears, my testimony, the witnesses who backed me, and above it all, my father's voice echoing in memory. Michael, I just want things to be fair. The morning of the decision, I sat outside the courthouse on the stone steps, watching people hurry past. Some were there for traffic violations, others for civil disputes. All of them carried their own burdens, but mine felt heavier because mine wasn't just about money. It was about family, about a bond already shattered, about a man whose last wishes had been twisted into a weapon. When the bailiff finally called us in, my stomach was knotted so tight it hurt. Amanda was already inside, dressed in pristine white this time, like she wanted to play the role of innocence itself. Her parents, who hadn't shown their faces once during Dad's illness, were sitting behind her, glaring at me as though I were the criminal. Judge Wilkins entered, and the room fell silent. She shuffled some papers, adjusted her glasses, and looked up at us with an expression that betrayed nothing. "This court has reviewed the will of Robert Thompson," she began, her voice steady, commanding. "The document is valid, properly signed and witnessed. It clearly states that the inheritance of $200,000 is to be divided equally between his children, Michael Thompson and Amanda Thompson, in the amount of $100,000 each." My breath caught. While Ms. Amanda Thompson has argued that she provided greater care in her father's final months, there is insufficient evidence to demonstrate that her father intended to alter his will. Witness testimony, along with the written will itself, supports the conclusion that his wishes were for equal distribution. Therefore, the petition to award the full inheritance to Ms. Thompson is denied. The gavel came down, sharp and final. For a moment, the room seemed frozen in time. My attorney leaned over and whispered, "We won." But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was exhaustion, relief tangled with grief. Amanda, on the other hand, exploded. She shot to her feet, her face red, her voice cracking as she shouted, "This is a joke. He doesn't deserve a cent. Dad promised me, not him." Her lawyer tugged at her arm, hissing at her to sit down, but she yanked away. Her words spilled out in fury, each one louder than the last. "You've stolen from me, Michael. You've always stolen from me." Judge Wilkins banged her gavel again. "Order. Ms. Thompson, one more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." But Amanda didn't care. She stormed out of the courtroom, her heels clattering against the tile, her parents trailing after her like shadows. Their glares lingered on me as they left, full of venom, as if I were the one who had betrayed them. When the door shut behind them, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. My father's wishes had been honored. Justice, though messy and painful, had prevailed. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps and let the autumn air fill my lungs. My attorney clapped me on the back. "You did right by your father," he said simply. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there alone with my thoughts that it should have felt like victory. And in a way it did. But there was no celebration, no joy. Because the cost of that victory was steep. I had lost my sister. Not to death, but to greed, bitterness, and pride. She had chosen money over family, lies over truth. And there was no coming back from that. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the check in front of me. $100,000, the fair share my father had wanted. But all I could think about was the empty chair across from me, where Amanda used to sit during Sunday dinners. Back when we still laughed, still loved, still believed family meant something unbreakable, that I realized then that money could never heal the wound she had carved. The inheritance wasn't a gift, it was a test. And Amanda had failed it. For me, it was a reminder that love without respect is hollow. That family without trust is nothing more than strangers bound by blood. The judge had spoken. The war was over. But the battlefield inside me was still smoldering, ashes of what used to be. The weeks after the verdict were quieter than I expected. There were no more phone calls from Amanda, no more poisonous messages passed through relatives, no more threats disguised as pleas. The silence should have felt peaceful, but at first it felt hollow, like the calm after a storm that had ripped the roof off your house. That I would come home from work and sit at the kitchen table, the check for $100,000 still tucked away in a drawer. I hadn't touched a cent of it. It wasn't that I didn't need the money. God knows there were repairs to be made, debts to pay down, and dreams I put off for too long. But every time I thought about cashing it, I saw my father's face. I heard his voice. Michael, I just want things to be fair. And I thought of Amanda, and how fairness had never been enough for her. I learned quickly that even though the court had cleared my name, Amanda's campaign had left scars in the family. Some relatives refused to speak to me, convinced I had manipulated the system. Others, embarrassed by how publicly Amanda had unraveled, kept their distance from both of us. Family gatherings that had once been warm and noisy were reduced to whispers and absence. One Sunday, I drove past Amanda's house. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe her smiling with neighbors. Maybe her packing up to run from the shame of her loss. But what I saw instead was loneliness. Her blinds were drawn, her driveway empty. She had won nothing. Not the money, not the sympathy, and certainly not the family she had claimed to protect. There was a part of me that pitted her. Greed had eaten away at her until there was nothing left but anger. But there was another part of me, a stronger part, that refused to carry her burden anymore. She had chosen this path. She had burned the bridge between us, and no matter how much I mourned the sister I once loved, I couldn't rebuild it alone. In the months that followed, I began to put the inheritance to use, not all at once, but carefully. I paid off Dad's lingering debts. I invested in fixing up his old garage, not to reopen it, but to preserve it. I turned into a kind of memorial, a space where his tools still hung on the wall, his workbench still stood stained with oil and sweat. It wasn't about the money. It was about honoring the man who had given me everything that truly mattered: integrity, perseverance, and a name I could be proud of. One evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The house creaked softly in the evening air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I had made it through the fire without losing myself. Amanda's absence still hurt. There were moments when I thought about the way we used to play in the yard as kids, chasing each other until our lungs burned. There were memories of Christmas mornings, of birthdays, of shared laughter. But those moments belonged to another time, another version of us that no longer existed. The sister I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who saw me not as family, but as competition. Justice had come with a price. I kept my father's legacy intact, but I lost my sister in the process. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only way it could have ended. I finished my drink, leaned back in the chair, and let the evening settle around me. Life would go on. The money would eventually be spent or saved. The house would need more repairs. The years would keep rolling forward. But one truth would always remain. I had stood my ground. I had honored my father's wishes. And though I paid a steep price, I walked away with something no one could ever take from me: my dignity. Sometimes, the real inheritance isn't what's written in the will. It's the strength to protect what's right, even when it costs you everything else. And that, I realized, was the final gift my father left me.